Conference will now be recorded.
Good morning. Thank you very much for joining us this morning. My name is Juuso Santi. I'm a solution sales consultant here at Cim200, and I will take you through this webinar where we have a look into our new manufacturing solution for Cim200 arena, which is Cim200. I will try to keep this webinar to an hour. I pretty much always overrun a little, but there's so many things that I could cover. But today we'll have a look into that a bit of a high level. So how we will run this webinar is first of all, for those of you who are not familiar with us, I will just give a quick introduction to Sim Services. We'll have a look where Cim200 manufacturing lies at the moment and how Cim200 will fit in and how where our roots are and such like. I will then move on to the main course, which is the overview demo of Cim200. And after the demo, we will talk how you can bring your existing solution, especially if you're using Cim200 manufacturing currently, how you can get your data and how you can migrate to Cim200. Look into commercials, of course, that's of interest, and also where we will take Cim200 going forward. And then we will discuss about next steps and have a look if you have any questions. So during the presentation, if you can keep yourselves muted and use the chat box for any questions, and we will visit those questions at the end. Right, so who are Cim? So Cim Software is an award-winning strategic ISV, which is an independent software vendor with Sage, and we have gained that title with our Cim50 solution, which is our manufacturing solution for Sage 50 market. We are the Sage's go-to solution for on a manufacturing solution for Sage 50 market, and now we are breaking into the Cim200 market with our Cim200 software. We are not new to the arena, so we've been Sage business partners and developers since the mid-90s. So we have extended knowledge and experience in developing solutions for the market. Our main focus always been manufacturing, so we live and breathe manufacturing. That's where we sit. We have successfully implemented over 300 Sage 50 and 200 sites, and in addition to that, we have implemented Cim50 to over 300 sites. So there are currently over 300 sites that are using Cim50, and hopefully Cim200 will follow. Our management team has over 100 years of experience in using, implementing, supporting, and developing manufacturing systems. So, like I say, manufacturing is what we live and breathe. That's where most of our knowledge lies. Of course, in addition to the financials of on the Sage 50 and Sage 200 market. With Sage 200 manufacturing, so it hasn't been developed in a very long time, and the Sage 200 version 2020 R2 is actually the last tested version for Sage 200 manufacturing. So any of the later versions have not been tested, and there is no support as of end of September of last year for Sage200 manufacturing. So it is an end-of-life product, and any existing users of Sage200 manufacturing will need to start looking for new solutions rather sooner than later, and that's where Cim200 will come into play. Also, if you're running Sage200 version Spring 2018 or older, you will need to upgrade your Sage200 prior to end of September of 2022. And with the above, there are limitations where you can go if you're using Sage200 manufacturing as well. So those of you who might be using the older versions of Sage, you might want to start looking into the new solutions pretty much straight away. With Cim200, so it is based on Sage200 manufacturing solution as a familiar looking and feeling software. So we have focused on enhancing existing modules and recoding, planning, and the works orders all together. And we started scoping Cim200 in June 2019 when we identified Sage200 manufacturing hasn't moved or seen any major enhancements in a very long time. And we brought in the Cim200 onto the market, and it was very well received. So we started scoping in June 2019, and we've completed the coding work in August 2021. And following that, we released a beta version to beta sites in September of last year. And following successful beta program, we released Cim200 into the market on the 1st of December 2021. And we will not stop where the software is currently, where we say the coding work completed by August 2021 is not the end of the product. So we will continuously keep on developing Cim200 with new features, and we will further enhance existing features. We have also partnered with a couple of strategic partners, namely Tracer, that will bring a spindle document capture into Cim200, and so you can capture all your works order documentations with the spindle. And Data Links will bring in a shop floor data capture a little bit later on this year, and that was and also they full warehouse management suite will integrate with Cim200 too. So with Cim200, we are fully integrated with Sage200 Professional. So we actually sit within Sage200, and we have enhanced the stock SOP bill of materials. So we are using standard Sage for those modules without enhancements, with some of the features I will demonstrate on the demo in a moment. And we have completely rewritten planning and the works orders. But at the same time, we retained all the functionality and the look and feel of Sage200 manufacturing. So if you are existing Sage200 manufacturing user, as you will see, it will be very familiar feel to you. Also, one of the things that we wanted to really focus on is a migration route. So we will have an easy migration path from Sage200 manufacturing, Cim200 if you're looking to upgrade, as well as from Swan, Infor Swan, which is another end-of-life manufacturing solution that we are supporting. And also, if you have your business partners who are developers as well as supporting you, it is fully customizable using our SDKs. So your developers can customize screens and write to the tables on the background if you have any third-party solutions. Right, so let's move on to the main course and have a look at the software itself. So hopefully you can all see now my Cim200. Should be familiar look for most of you. And if I go first of all, we'll have a look at the stock records. So we're using standard Sage stock control and the Sage list views with our additions. So we have brought in a number of columns that we have extended our offering to. So there are multiple new columns that you can choose. So if I select one of them, which is a quarantine, and quarantine is a new functionality from Cim200 in the stock control. I will have a look into that, how it works in a moment. And you can see here we have a couple of products that can go into the quarantine. So if we go in and have a look at one of the new features we have first of all, so pretty much everything here is standard Sage, but we have introduced a stock profile, which is a snapshot of what happens, what are the movements, what you have, where you have the stock. And you can filter this by a warehouse, or you can choose overall. You can see we have 50 of these in stock. We can see 50 of those are in quarantine at the moment, but we will visit this screen a couple of times during the presentation. So we'll come back to that a little bit later on. So if I go into the stock record itself, and again, it's a standard screen, but we have brought in a few items from or additions to the screen. For instance, there is a quarantine, so you can choose whether the part goes into a quarantine at the purchase order, receipt, works order completion, or bomb build stage, or whether you can just transfer the items into the quarantine waiting for inspection. Also, this is one of the Swan features we brought in. If we can say that this pre-packed reactor will supersede let's say, a cooker hood, and it will be superseded by another product. So there's a nice view of how, whether there is an old part that this reactor will supersede or is being superseded by, and that can be used on the works order issuing as well. So I leave the superseded by, so we will see that a little bit later on. It doesn't confuse our system. We brought in manufacturing and planning settings together, and there is another new feature that it's a settings driven that you can enable it. So we can now allow rescheduling of MRP recommendations instead of always, if you have any, let's say, date changes for the demands on the sales order, that customer changes the sales order date, MRP in Cim200 manufacturing will give you a recommendation to either cancel the old works order and then raise a new. Now we can allow rescheduling of that. So instead of raising a new works order, it will just change the dates when the works orders or the purchase orders are required. We also brought in aggregation, which in a sense, if we allow aggregation, it means that you can define a period in days, calendar weeks, or calendar months, of which it will combine the recommendations for. So if we are aggregating replenishments, all the works orders or the purchase orders will be combined for that period. So if you have multiple demands for the, let's say, for a calendar month, or multiple recommendations for a calendar month, you will be able to automatically combine those. So you only want to raise a purchase order for demands for a 1 month, rather than 10, 20, even 100 purchase orders for that period. But for demonstration purposes, I will leave that switched off. Alerts is another nice little feature. So we can add that to stock items itself. So if I would create a alert for a sales order, say so I will create an alert just to say to ensure the engineers are qualified to install this product, and you can make this alert to appear in number of locations. Also, we brought in audit log to stock items, as well as a bill of materials records and works orders. So any changes to static data will be captured by the audit log. So we can see when the changes were done, by who, which field, what was the old value, what was the new value. And we keep that record until you have cleared the audit logs. So you can clear them periodically, just to keep the database tidy. Commercials tab, you can see what has happened to a product in either in the last 12 months or years previous. So you can choose different years. You can see how many you have purchased, what was the value, or how many you have manufactured, what was their value, how much you sold, and such like. And the graph on the bottom will show you a cost price history in a graphical representation. So if it is very erratic, you might go and have a look why it is so erratic. If it's a nice flat line, you're more than likely okay. Customer part numbers. So these come into play, especially on sales order entry. So you can now enter your sales orders using a customer part numbers. And if I create one for, let's say, Better Kitchens there, and the part number completely different to App Retail. So App Retails use this part number to order that, and a Better Kitchens use this number. And we'll see how that works at the sales order entry state. We do also have a custom part numbers list view, which you can of course filter by, let's say, by App Retail, for instance, and you will then see all the part numbers for all the customers, or you can filter them by a customer. Locations, we can a little bit beyond in a warehouse hierarchy to standard stage, and you can create a warehouse hierarchy saying the factory can be used as a manufactured warehouse, and you can say which warehouses you can use as a component warehouse for that particular location. You see there is a goods in transit warehouse as well as the quarantine. So we can see we have the 15 quarantine location, these parts, and goods in transit location is new feature in Cim200, which is probably best described by showing some of the settings. So if I go into the Cim200 settings, so goods in transit, so with that enabled, you can choose. So let's say you have a factory and you can have predefined transfer times from one warehouse to another. So say you have a warehouse where you keep your stock and you keep the stock in that warehouse in Sage, and that could be even in China. And if that's in and you know that there can be a 6-week lead time before you can get those parts into your factory, you can define these transfer times in days and say to factory from Middlesbrough, it takes 6 days to get those goods from there, and MRP will recognize those transfer times and take those into account. When you transfer stock from, say from this example, from Middlesbrough to the factory, it will go into the goods in transit location. We have a goods in transit menu on the menu there, and you will be able to see what you have in that location, what you're expecting to receive to a warehouse. So you select factory, you can see that there are quantities coming from multiple different locations to you, and you can see when they've been dispatched, and you can then tell and book them in through goods in transit. You can also, whilst we are here, we can have a quick look on some of the features we have brought in. For instance, in stock items, you can make fields mandatory. So when you are creating new stock records, sometimes users will forget to add some important information. But what we have brought in is that you can say we would like to have these fields mandatory, and you wouldn't be able to save unless you fill those details in. Quarantine, we'll move on to that in a moment. But a couple of other items here is now you can prevent stock usage when the stock take is in printed or entering count stage, and you can do stock takes on the traceable items as well. You can, it's a settings driven, so you can allow MRP rescheduling, or you can use it like you're using Cim200 manufacturing currently, and from here you can clear down audit records if you so wish to. Bill of materials, we will have a look into the multiple routings in a moment, but reverse bomb bills is another additional feature to Cim200, which is different to Cim200 manufacturing. So on a reverse bomb build, you can reverse bomb build an item that you have bought in, so you don't need to manufacture that first. So let's say you are breaking down a car, so you buy a scrap car that you're breaking down into different parts. You build a bill of materials, so you might have a engine, wheels, wiring, looms, seats as a bill of materials. And once you have reversed, if you reverse build that car, you can say, I brought in these components into stock. This was the cost of them. This was the cost of a car. And if there are any variances, we can post them in the ledgers as well. Also, we have an option to fulfill component shortages with alternative items if we wanted to. And in commercials, we can configure quick text options, for instance, so you don't have to manually type in text lines on the sales orders every time, so you can have a library of commonly used texts. So we talked about quarantine and mentioned a number of times. So if I go into the quarantine, and I will see straight away what we have in the quarantine inspection location. So we can go and inspect the item. This been brought in manually, but if it was from a works order or if it was from a purchase order, it would tell you which where it came from, which works order, which purchase order it came into stock from, and there you can say how many you want to pass when you inspected them, which location it goes to, well, inspection notes if everything was good. You can see from here where it is needed, and you can choose if any items were rejected. So if we reject one from manufacturing, I have chosen to write it off. If it was on a purchase order, we could do a supplier return from here. I can say it was rejected because of a poor welding. And our list is empty now. I have inspected everything I had in the quarantine. You, of course, if you had more there, you would work through them one by one. And now you can see we have the free stock quantity of 49 because we have scrapped up one or written off that one that had a poor welding against it. Another additional or new feature for a Cim200 is that you can do rapid entry stock movements. So you can do all movements, you can add stock, you can write off stock, you can do stock transfers or internal issues. And if I would take the one that we have been looked for the pre-packed reactor, you can see if I have 49 available. I could write the reference there, and I can say how many I would write off. And if I wanted to write off a number of items, I could just choose them off the or build up a list, say how many I want to write off, and clear. Always happens writing on clicking the wrong button. It's meant to click save rather than the delete, but hey, so if I write, so we get a nice clean data to see how the MRP works, so we have no clutter. And now I have written off, so we have no stock, we have no demand. So MRP will you will see how MRP will work. Right. So in order for us to get MRP to react to something, we have to have a demand. So let's create first of all a sales order. So we'll create a new order, and I create it for Happy Retail, as they are good friends of the boss. We want to keep the boss happy, and do that from the factory. And I'll add items, and here we see we have a customer part number drop down. We can see all the parts that have a customer part number against for Happy Retail. So we have a couple of items, but you can see the better kitchens that we added is not, so it's pre-filtered for Happy Retail. And this is where the stock alert will appear, so your engineers are qualified. From the line view again, we can go into the stock profile and see what the stock figures are, what is coming in, what is going out, and it can become pre-filtered for the warehouse that you're raising the sales order against. So quite have any storage view when you are entering the sales order, you can see whether you have where the movements are and such like. And let's say we want to have 100 of these, and like on a purchase order processing, we can now add multiple dates for sales order line. So say we want to have these for 8th of March, but we agreed to deliver 20 in the first place. A week later, we agreed to deliver another 20. And the week after that, we'll do the balance of 60. Okay. And now, let's put the 60 in there as well. Okay. Now we'll save the line. We save the sales order, put the order number in. And now we have a sales order there. Didn't put any amounts in, but it's a friend of a boss, so it can be sold quite cheaply. And we start having a look on our planning module. So we done away with MPS and we renamed that as a demand schedule. But first of all, finding the right place. So first of all, we can, from the client, we can schedule the MRP refresh, including the demand schedule or MPS. So you can set that to run any day of the week at any time you want, and you can choose which demand sources you will want to include. If you want to include pro formas quotations on whole customers and such like, so it is entirely up to you. And where do you want to include the replenishments for, but you can now include the runs for MRP and the demand schedule. So if we go into the demand schedule, I'll click the auto refresh that we have brought into many of the screens. And I'll read the demand. And this defaults are run off the settings. But I will refresh the demand. It should be nice and quick. We only have a limited number of demands. Let's choose some demand sources that would help. And I will refresh the demand because it's merry way looking at what we have. We can see we have 3 sales order demands. We have excluded number of items, so we give you headline figures here. And this has auto refreshed, and we can go and interrogate exclusions as well. So we have plenty of stock items that are inactive, so they've been excluded from the demands. But we have included There's one for stock reorder level, but we have 3 demands for the same sales order for the different dates as we set up on sales order line. So MRP will see all these. Go into the refreshing the MRP, and MRP is slightly smarter than Cim200 manufacturing MRP. And when you're running it on a client, as I'm doing now, it runs on a client memory, so everyone else can carry on working their merry ways because it's running on the client memory. No other users will be affected by the MRP run. If you run a scheduled MRP run, it will run on a server, so you do not have to leave any machines open and running overnight. So you can schedule it to run on a server. But if you wanted to refresh the MRP manually, you can do so from a client machine at any time. And also, you can run the MRP against specific stock records, sales orders, or works orders. If you have a big order, you might want to run the MRP for that one particular sales order if you wanted to. Okay. And also, we'll have a look into that, but MRP will work on the operation level. So if you have any components that are required for a operation, Cim200 manufacturing didn't really do anything with that information, but Cim200 will recognize when the parts are required on the operation level. So let's say you raise a works order that you will start today, your last operation is in 6 months' time, and you need some components for that particular operation. Our MRP will be smart enough to raise recommendations either for the sub-assembly works orders or purchase orders for the start of that operation, rather than having a full kit ready to go at the start of the manufacturing process. Okay, so we have now here all the recommendations for our demands, including the sub-assemblies for the top level and purchase orders to satisfy the demands. And we try to make the interrogating MRP recommendations as intuitive and easy to navigate as possible. So first of all, you have option again to view the stock profile from MRP list view. So we see we have nothing in stock, but now we have a sales order quantity of 100. We can choose and we can view the sales order directly from here. So you can see total number is 100. We have 3 lines for different quantities. We have real-time stock projection, so we can see when to dispatch these goods and what our stock balance for that time would be. Also, we have MRP, so these are all committed demands and replenishments. Then you can also see what you have on a MRP list. So for these recommendations, you have MRP to raise works order to supply for the demand. Again, repeating for those 3 lines that we raised. This can be useful to see when, if you had a look at this, you can see the same view on sales order entry, and you will be able to see if you have an urgent requirement. Okay, we have sales order demand, but you might be able to squeeze 1 or 2 in before the, let's say, 8th of February, if your manufacturing times and are shorter for the item. The tags, we cleared up a little. So if I collapse first of all, so we can see we have our recommendation, and we can go and see the demands. So this recommendation demand is the sales order line for the quantity of 20 for that date. And we can see all the descendants, what we have against that part. So we see we have a works order and descendants for that is a recommendation 38 to raise a purchase order on the 4th to or demand date is on the 4th, so we would have to order it on the 17th of February. So it all cascades down with the dates taken into account. Of course, from here, you can action recommendations for the top level. You can choose to action recommendations for the lower levels if you wanted to, but you can do that from here as well. Of course, you can combine the recommendations from here as well. So you combine the recommendations, but you can automatically set that because these are all in March. Say you had an aggregation set for a calendar month. These would be all these demands would be combined for the earliest demand date. So you would have just one recommendation for all three, but of course you can then split the recommendations from here as well if you wanted to, but that can help your planners. We can action recommendations for the selected recommendations, or we can select recommendations and all descendants. So let's raise a few works orders and purchase orders from here. So it starts working its merry way on the background, and once that's done, we can have a look how our planning side of things work in terms of works orders. We brought in trial kitting, so you can now trial kit one or many works orders and bill of materials. And we have a rough cut capacity planning. So if we have a look how that works, if I select all, say we have a look into the month of March, and let's have those in weekly buckets. So you can have run a capacity planning on the labor, resources, machines, or groups. I do that on the labor side of things at the moment. So you get a graphical representation what there is. We can see the kitchen fitter is available. There is a little bit loaded, and we can see our assembler is overloaded all that time. You can view the underlying data from here. So I have an assembler. It was red, it's overloaded. So we can see that it's just over an hour overloaded, and we can see which works orders it's causing that resource to be overloaded and what is filling the capacity, how many hours are required, or what time is required for those works orders. A couple of them are quite big ones, so 5 hours each. So if I could do something about that, I could easily relieve some pressure here on that resource for that date. From here, you can also go and view the works order if you wanted to. Right, so if we go and have a look, so we had works orders. And one of these is this particular works order is a one of the offending ones. We'll have a look at this in a moment, but I'll show you the capacity planning first. So this is where the routings come into play. Oh, actually, let's go and have a look at the bill of materials record instead. Nothing like changing your plans on the fly. But if I go into the bill of materials list and let's have a look. First of all, that was our top level of this subcomponent, but let's have a look at our top level product first. So we're using again standard Sage bill of materials, but we have extended it and we have brought in a couple of new types of bill of materials as well. So we have something called percentage BOM, which is where you can define the quantities as a percentage rather than a fixed quantity, commonly used in food industry and the chemicals industries, where you can include your recipes and such like as a percentage of the top level. And also we have a kit BOM, which means when you're raising if I set this particular part as a kit BOM, when you raise a sales order and dispatch this part, it will perform a BOM build on the background, so saving you a step. So if this is a kit, it will mop up all the components from stock and dispatch it as a kit. Then on the dispatch note, you can define whether you give the components as a packing list, for instance, or you will be just giving a top level part number. So very similar way to how, let's say, IKEA furniture works. You have lots of you have a kit that goes in the cardboard box. You're not actually doing any assembly work. You're just sending the kit over. So you can just raise a top level sales order, dispatching, BOM builds being performed on the background, and all the components being dispatched. On components side of things, we allow you to edit sub-assemblies directly from the bill of materials, and we can go and edit the components from here. All the notes, if you're using Crystal Reports, you can take advantage of rich type font, so you can add notes to the record. You can change the font, you can make it a bit bigger, underline, bold, and change the color to something that pops out wherever you want it to add. We have these notes against bill of materials, works orders, components, and operations. In costing, you can see when this has been costed, and we keep a record of the of old costings. And then we have the audit log. So even if I would be amending this with elevated privileges, which allows you, if you have the version control on, allows you to amend bill of materials without up versioning it, our audit log goes over and above that, and we still keep a record of the record of the any changes to static data. So here we can see we have created a new route, which is an alternative route, which can be seen from here. So we don't have the operations tab itself. We have different, we have a limited number of different routings against the bill of materials record. So if we go and have a look at the other stock item here. So over here, jump from one place to another is to routings. So we have a look in the preferred route. We remember we are overloaded on the packers, and forgot to mention that on the component side of things. But we have against the operations and components, you can have an additional 20 analysis codes, so you can really analyze everything further than you could in the past. And like as I mentioned, if you had any components against the operation, the MRP would be smart enough to see when you are starting that particular operation, and you will only need those components for that the start time of that operation. Okay, but here we see this is our preferred routing. But if we go and have a look on alternative, we can see now we're using a plumber, packer, and we're actually using subcontractor to do some of our assembly. So if I move on and we go back into the works order list, so we had the works order. Well, actually, let's use this one, which was for the quantity of 60. That's the offending one. So over here, we're looking into the works order record first. So we brought in to the component screen, see what the components are required, quantities, and all the relevant information on the main screen, so you don't have to drill into it. See the references, and if you have analysis codes against that particular component. We have operations list, so we can see which on a working bomb, we can see which what the timings are, what resources we are using, if we have any subcontract, any components for the particular operation. And again, the notes and the 20 analysis codes are available to you. And on the bottom here, we have the spindle document capture, where you can print and bring it back in against the works orders, any documentation. So over here on the top, and again, we have on the works order record, we have a audit log. But we go into the routing, so that's where you can change the routing for the works order record. So if I choose to choose alternative routing for this works order only, I can save that. So the MRP will always raise the works orders against a default route, so that's what it works towards. But you can manually change it, or when you're raising a manual works order, you can change the routing at that point. So if I have a look into the what happened with our capacity for that period, let's put the same details, and we'll run that, and now we can see the overloading is gone. So now our factory is happy and nothing is overloaded. We can actually manufacture everything on time, and we assemblers as well as the packers are available bulk of the time, so we can easily go and get a little bit more work in. Okay. In terms from here on end, it is pretty standard stage what we have on from works order completions and such like. However, you can now issue stock without allocating stock against the works order first. And when you go into the dispatch and on a works order completion, you can choose whether it goes into the into a quarantine. Also, if you partially completed works orders, or you have completed the works orders at any stage up until the completion of the or closure of works order, you can reverse complete all the way through. Also, in stock history, I go into a part, we can see we have brought in a warehouse and overall quantity. We keep a record of what you had in which warehouse at any given time. So we had, and where the stock moved to. So we added a couple of columns to tell which warehouse and what was the quantity in that particular warehouse at that date. So you could go and view what happened in 6 months 6 months ago, if you so wished. Okay. So that pretty much concludes my demonstration. So from now, from this point on, it is pretty much standard stage. So we haven't touched on that side of things. There are a few things on purchase order that we have enhanced, such as you can, on purchase order line entry, you can view the stock profile, you can view linked orders from purchase order, and if you have you can allocate on the purchase order. When you're receiving a goods in, you can allocate stock to the works orders right at that moment in time. A very light touch, but I'm conscious of running over time as usual. So if you have any questions or want to look more in depth in the features, I'm more than happy to do so at a later date. Right, so if I jump back into my slideshow, and first of all, what we would like to answer, why switch to Cim200. So first of all, we'll have a look on migration on the next slide, but it is very easy migration route. Your functionality, you are not missing out on any features from Sage 200 manufacturing. You are only gaining. So we made for instance, the MRP is much smarter. You have full control when you run your demand schedule or the MPS and MRP. You can do that from the user interface. And if you have existing users, Sage 200 manufacturing or Sage 200, you should be able to pick it up fairly easily. So minimal training is required. And we are fully integrated with Sage 200. As you can see, if we sit on it, so we are not a blocking or anything like that. In terms of a data migration, we have what we call one-click migration tool. It's actually 2 clicks minimum. So you have to choose what works orders you bring in, for instance, and then you have to click OK. But you can choose whether you bring in all your live, your closed, or all the works orders. You can do that in 2 stages, where you can bring in first all the closed works orders, and that because we now allow you to archive all works orders, you could bring all the closed works orders, archive everything, and then bring in all the live works orders as a secondary migration, but that can be discussed at the time at the scoping stage. It also migrates all the comparable settings between Sage 200 manufacturing and Cim200. So if there are features like goods in transit, quarantine, multiple routings. As a default, they will not be switched on until you decide to switch them on from the settings. So you can keep on using Cim200 as you were using Sage 200 manufacturing. And that will work for Cim50 as well as the Swan migration as well. And because BOM and stock items remain in Sage 200, you're only gaining new features as you've seen today. In terms of the commercials, depending on when you're watching this, but it is on monthly subscription, which includes software support and updates. So you are only requiring module, so, and user count will come from the Sage 200 users. So if everyone using Cim200 will have to have a Sage 200 license, and the cost for that, all of that is just £383.50 per month. Is a monthly subscription, so there's no long-term tie-ins. And what we recommending for installation, training, and consultancy when upgrading from Sage 200 manufacturing, it can be as little as 3 to 6 days. So if you are a proficient user of Sage 200 manufacturing, you want to move and carry on working Sage 200 or Cim200 in the same way as Sage 200 manufacturing, it can be as little as 3 days, and that is including scoping, installation, data migration, everything. So it's a very, very easy migration route for you. As mentioned, we are not stopping developing the product. So we have committed now to integrate with project accounting as a first major feature release. We will be enhancing quotations where you can do estimating, quotations in steroids, as I like to call it. You will be able to do estimating, create one-off bill of materials and such like. Also, we'll bring in listening to our Swan customers, and we will be bringing in byproducts where at the manufacturing stage, if you have any byproducts, you can bring them into stock. But we haven't committed to very many other features. So we like to listen to our customers and our business partners, and we are welcoming any feedback of features that are desired by our customers and business partners, as you will be the ones who are actually using the software. So we want to satisfy those demands as well as we can. And we keep on pleased. We have regular meetings to decide to see what is the most wanted features in from our customers, and we will bring those most wanted features in as soon as we can. So next steps. So I'll contact you over the next week or so just to see if you've been interested in our software and if you would like to progress any further. There will be further details on our website as well as the brochure there. And if you have any questions, you are welcome to email myself or info@cim-services.co.uk, and we can answer to any questions through that, or we can arrange further demos and conversations if you get in touch. So I will stop this recording and we move on to the questions. I can see there's been a couple. So first of all, if you're watching the recording of this, thank you very much for following it all the way through to here. But we will move on to the questions from this session. And if you have, after watching the recording, if you have any questions, please send them over to us and we are more than happy to answer those. Thank you.